He thought she was just a cook, until the cowboy found his life's love in the kitchen. Jack pulled his horse to a stop outside the small ranch house, the dry wind whipping his dusty coat. He had been riding since early morning, moving cattle from one pasture to another. The sun was bright and harsh, casting long shadows over the land. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and looked around. The ranch was smaller than he expected, simple but neat, surrounded by rolling hills and grazing cows. He had been hired for the summer to help with the cattle, and though he was used to long days in the saddle, the thought of living in a quiet place like this felt strange. It was different from the open plains he was accustomed to. As Jack dismounted, the sound of soft humming reached him from the kitchen window. It was melodic, quiet, and steady. He paused, curious, and slowly walked closer. Through the window he saw a woman moving gracefully around the kitchen. She was small, with chestnut hair tied neatly behind her head, and her apron was dusted with flour from whatever she had been baking. Her movements were calm but precise. She washed dishes, chopped vegetables, and occasionally glanced at a small notebook on the counter, probably reading a recipe. Jack shook his head and smiled faintly. "Just the cook," he muttered to himself. Emily had been working at the ranch for several years. She was hired as the cook and housekeeper, but she treated the place as if it belonged to her. Everything had its place, everything was clean, and the meals she prepared were always hearty and fresh. She knew the ranch inside and out, from the back pasture to the barn, and she moved with quiet confidence. She had learned early in life how to care for herself and for others, and her life was built around helping and supporting the people around her. Yet, she kept herself humble, never seeking attention. Jack entered the ranch house through the back door. Emily looked up and gave him a polite nod. "Evening," she said softly. Her voice was calm, almost musical, carrying a kindness that made the room feel warmer than the hot stove and sunlight streaming through the windows. Jack nodded in return, not saying much. He was not the type to waste words, especially not with someone he assumed was only the cook.
"Did you want something to eat?" Emily asked. She set a cutting board down and wiped her hands on her apron.
Jack shrugged. "Maybe later." "I'm heading back to the barn soon," he said. He wanted to leave quickly, but something about her calm presence made him pause. She didn't seem to notice or mind his hesitation, simply returning to her work with practiced ease. Jack stepped outside again, walking toward the barn. He tried to ignore the small curiosity gnawing at him. He didn't usually pay attention to cooks or housekeepers. He was a man of action, used to the outdoors, horses, and hard work. But for some reason he found himself glancing back at the kitchen window. Emily moved as if in a dance, her motions fluid and natural. He caught her looking up briefly, catching his eyes, and then she smiled slightly before returning to her chopping. It was a small smile, but it made Jack feel an unexpected warmth. He shook his head. "I can't be thinking about the cook," he muttered to himself. The next morning, Jack was up early. The cattle needed to be rounded, and the sun had not yet risen over the hills. He saddled his horse and headed out, the air crisp and cool. As he worked, he noticed Emily in the distance, walking toward the barn with a bucket of water. She moved quickly but carefully, balancing the bucket while keeping an eye on the animals. One of the calves had wandered slightly off, and she gently guided it back with a soft voice and steady hands. Jack watched for a moment, impressed. Most people he knew would have panicked or yelled, but Emily handled the situation with calm confidence. Later, during breakfast, Jack finally spoke to her. "You've been here long?" he asked casually, not wanting to reveal too much of his curiosity. Emily looked up from the plates she was setting. "A few years now," she replied. "I know the ranch well. Helps to know where everything is." Jack nodded, noticing the slight pride in her tone. She wasn't boastful, but she was clearly capable. As the day went on, Jack found himself paying more attention to Emily. He noticed how she moved around the ranch, not just in the kitchen. She helped feed the animals, repaired fences, and even carried supplies up steep paths with ease. Her quiet determination fascinated him. She didn't ask for thanks or attention, but it was clear she cared deeply about her work and the people around her. One afternoon, Jack was fixing a fence near the back pasture when a sudden cry reached his ears. He looked up and saw Emily kneeling beside a horse, inspecting its hoof. The horse had a small cut, and Emily's hands were steady as she cleaned the wound and wrapped it carefully. Jack rode over, surprised by her skill. "You know what you're doing," he said. Emily looked up and smiled faintly.
"I grew up on a farm. Had to learn early," she replied.
Jack nodded, impressed. She wasn't just a cook. She was strong, skilled, and fearless when needed. That evening, Jack found himself lingering in the kitchen again. Emily was preparing dinner, chopping vegetables with swift, precise movements. The smell of fresh bread and roasted meat filled the room. Jack leaned against the counter, watching quietly. "Smells good," he said finally. Emily glanced at him and nodded. "Eat while it's warm," she said simply. Jack smiled faintly, realizing how much he had underestimated her. She wasn't just a cook. She was the heart of the ranch, quietly holding everything together. Over the next few days, Jack began noticing little things about Emily. The way she always remembered what the ranch hands liked to eat, the small gestures of kindness she offered without anyone noticing, and the way she handled challenges calmly and efficiently. Jack realized that there was a strength in her quiet demeanor, a confidence that was rare and admirable. One evening, Jack and Emily were both outside checking on the last of the cattle. The sky was painted with shades of orange and purple as the sun set behind the hills. Jack watched Emily work, guiding the cattle with soft words and gentle gestures. He finally understood something he hadn't realized before. He wasn't just curious about her. He was drawn to her presence, her skill, her kindness, and the calm way she faced every task. As they walked back to the ranch house, Emily carrying a small basket of vegetables, Jack spoke for the first time with real intention. "You do a lot more than cook," he said. Emily looked at him and raised an eyebrow, smiling faintly. "I suppose," she replied. "I just like helping where I can." Jack nodded, realizing he admired more than just her work. He admired the person she was, and he felt an unfamiliar pull in his chest, a feeling he hadn't expected when he first arrived at the ranch. That night, as Jack lay in his small room, he thought about Emily. He remembered her smile, the way she moved, and how effortlessly she managed the ranch and the people in it. He realized that the simple assumption he had made, that she was just a cook, was completely wrong. She was more than that. She was capable, kind, brave, and quietly remarkable, and without realizing it, he had started to care for her in a way that surprised him. The next morning, Jack rose early again, eager to see her. He found her in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. The light of dawn poured through the window, casting a warm glow over her face. Jack paused, watching her for a moment, feeling a strange mix of admiration and something deeper, something he couldn't yet name. She looked up and caught his eyes, and for a brief moment, the world outside seemed to fade away. Jack knew, even then, that this summer at the ranch would be unlike any other. He had come expecting hard work, long days, and simple living. What he hadn't expected was to be drawn into the life of someone who had quietly captivated him without even trying. Emily, with her quiet strength and gentle heart, had begun to change the way he saw the ranch, the work, and even himself. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: he would never see her as just a cook again. The next morning, Jack woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the soft stirrings of the ranch coming alive. The sun had barely risen over the hills, painting the sky with soft orange and pink streaks. He dressed quickly, boots and hat on, ready for another long day of work. Today, the ranch needed extra attention because a few cows had wandered farther than usual. Jack saddled his horse, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility on his shoulders, but he also felt a flicker of excitement. He knew Emily would be moving about the ranch as usual, and for some reason, he found himself eager to see her. He rode toward the barn first, checking fences along the way. He saw Emily in the distance, her silhouette framed by the early morning sun. She carried a basket of eggs in one hand, balancing it carefully while her other hand rested lightly on the back of a small calf she was guiding toward the barn. Jack slowed his horse, watching her work. There was something mesmerizing about the way she moved, effortless, confident, and calm. He realized that she wasn't just performing tasks. She was connecting with the animals and the ranch itself in a way that made everything feel alive. Jack called out, "Need any help?" But Emily shook her head with a small smile. "I've got it," she said softly. Her voice was calm, steady, and even though it was quiet, it carried a sense of authority. Jack nodded and rode on, but he couldn't stop glancing back. There was a quiet strength in her that made him feel both respect and curiosity. Later, during breakfast, Jack found himself at the kitchen table, stealing glances at Emily as she moved about. She placed plates in front of the ranch hands, poured coffee carefully, and offered warm smiles. She didn't speak much unless spoken to, but every action showed care. Jack realized that she noticed everything. The way someone liked their eggs, who needed an extra cup of coffee, who preferred their toast lightly browned. She wasn't just a cook. She was attentive, thoughtful, and considerate. Jack couldn't help but smile. He had never met someone so quietly remarkable. His life had always been about action, riding horses, moving cattle, fixing fences. He wasn't used to noticing subtle gestures or small acts of kindness. Yet Emily made him see these things differently. He found himself wanting to pay attention, to understand her better, and maybe even to earn her respect. After breakfast, Jack went to help with the cattle. Emily followed behind, carrying a small bag of feed. Jack noticed how she guided the animals with gentle words, not harsh commands. A calf strayed too far and she approached it slowly, extending her hand and speaking softly until it allowed her to lead it back. Jack shook his head in silent admiration. Most people would have panicked or tried to chase it with force. Emily handled it calmly, with patience and care. By midday, Jack was covered in dust and sweat. He decided to take a short break near the creek that ran along the edge of the ranch. Emily arrived soon after, setting her basket down and sitting on a rock nearby. She took out a small towel and dabbed at her forehead, smiling faintly at Jack. "Long morning," she said simply. Jack nodded, feeling slightly awkward. He wasn't used to talking to someone like this outside of work. "I've never seen anyone handle the animals like you do," Jack said finally. He kept his voice casual, but he couldn't hide the hint of admiration. Emily looked at him, her eyes calm and steady. "I grew up on a farm." "You learn how to handle them early," she replied. There was no boast in her voice, just simple truth. Jack nodded, realizing she didn't need to prove herself. Her actions spoke louder than any words could. Over the next few days, Jack found himself paying more attention to Emily. He noticed small things, how she always remembered who liked what for breakfast, how she quietly cleaned up messes without being asked, how she comforted a nervous animal or a struggling ranch hand without making a scene. He began to understand that her quiet presence was powerful. She didn't demand attention or praise, yet everyone on the ranch respected her. One afternoon, Jack and Emily found themselves at the back pasture, fixing a fence that had been damaged during a storm. The wind had picked up and the clouds overhead threatened rain. Jack lifted a heavy post, struggling with the weight, when Emily stepped forward without hesitation. "Here, let me help," she said. He was surprised but relieved as she grabbed the other end. Together, they positioned the post perfectly, securing it in place. Jack realized that Emily was not just capable inside the kitchen. She was strong, resourceful, and unafraid of hard work. As they worked, Jack found himself talking more freely than he had expected. He shared stories of his childhood, growing up with horses and open land, and Emily listened with quiet interest, occasionally asking questions that showed she genuinely cared. He was surprised by how natural it felt to be around her. Usually he kept people at a distance, but with Emily, he felt comfortable, like he could share small pieces of himself without fear of judgment. By evening, the storm finally arrived. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and heavy rain began to fall. Jack and Emily hurried back to the ranch house, soaked but laughing at the sudden downpour. Inside, Emily quickly moved to get towels and warm drinks ready. Jack watched her, amazed at how she managed everything so calmly, despite the chaos outside. Her presence made the house feel safe and welcoming, and he couldn't help but feel drawn to her warmth and care. That night, after the storm had passed, Jack found himself sitting near the kitchen fire, watching Emily as she cleaned up after dinner. The soft light of the fire cast gentle shadows across her face, highlighting her focused expression. He realized he was noticing things he had never paid attention to before. The way her hands moved, the small smile she gave when something went right, the way she quietly hummed to herself. Emily looked up, catching his gaze. "Long day?" she asked softly. Jack nodded. "Yeah. But I mean, it's been good," he said, unsure of how much to reveal. Emily simply smiled and returned to her work, her calm confidence putting him at ease. He realized that he wanted to be around her more, to learn from her, and perhaps even to protect her in some small way. Over the next week, Jack's feelings grew. He found himself looking for excuses to be near Emily, whether helping with the cattle, repairing fences, or simply walking to the barn together. He noticed how she handled challenges, small or large, with patience and skill. He admired her for her strength, her intelligence, and her kindness. It wasn't just physical strength. It was the quiet resilience that came from years of hard work and care. One afternoon, Jack witnessed Emily helping a young ranch hand who had injured his hand while moving hay. Emily knelt beside him, cleaned the wound carefully, and wrapped it securely. She spoke softly, reassuring him and calming his nerves. Jack felt a surge of admiration. He realized that this quiet woman whom he had first dismissed as just the cook was someone extraordinary. She had a way of making everyone around her feel cared for and valued. Jack began to notice little gestures that made Emily even more remarkable. She would bring extra food to the tired ranch hands, mend clothes that were torn during work, and quietly ensure that everyone had what they needed without being asked. Her humility and thoughtfulness were natural, not performed. Jack realized that her heart was as strong as her hands, and it made him respect her more than he had expected. As the days passed, Jack felt a growing connection to Emily. He couldn't explain it fully. He had never felt this way about anyone before, but he knew he wanted to be near her, to talk with her, to share moments of the day, no matter how small. Emily, meanwhile, continued her work with quiet grace, unaware of the deepening feelings Jack harbored for her. Yet the small glances and fleeting moments they shared hinted at the bond beginning to form between them. By the end of the second week, Jack had realized something important. Emily was no longer just the cook to him. She was strong, intelligent, kind, and brave. She had a quiet authority that made him respect her deeply, and he felt drawn to her presence in a way he had not expected. Every small act, every gesture of care, every smile had begun to build a connection that went beyond work or duty. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Jack found himself walking to the barn after his chores, hoping to catch a glimpse of Emily before nightfall. He saw her tending to the horses, brushing their coats with gentle, careful strokes. The golden light of sunset highlighted her features, and for the first time, Jack felt the stirrings of something more than admiration. He felt the beginnings of a feeling that could grow into something deeper, something meaningful. Jack realized that this summer at the ranch was changing him. He had come expecting hard work and simple days, but instead, he had found someone remarkable, someone who made the ranch feel alive in ways he had never imagined. Emily had opened his eyes to the quiet strength in people, the beauty of kindness, and the warmth that could come from simple acts of care. He knew that the days ahead would reveal more, and he felt a quiet excitement for the connection that was beginning to grow between them. And so as night fell and the stars began to shine over the quiet ranch, Jack sat outside, thinking about Emily. He realized that he could no longer see her as just the cook. She was more than that. She was strong, capable, kind, and brave. She was someone who made life richer, brighter, and more meaningful. And without fully understanding it yet, Jack knew that he was beginning to fall for her, not just for what she did, but for who she truly was. The morning air was crisp and fresh as Jack rode toward the pastures, the smell of damp earth lingering from last night's rain. He noticed the way the sun caught the dew on the grass, turning the field into a shimmering sea of green. Emily was already moving about, carrying buckets of feed and checking on the animals. Her hair was tied neatly, strands falling around her face in soft waves as she worked. Jack slowed his horse, watching her with quiet admiration. Every movement she made seemed natural and purposeful, as if the ranch itself moved with her rhythm. Jack decided to stop for a moment. "Need a hand?" he called. Emily glanced over, her eyes meeting his with a gentle, knowing look. "I've got it for now," she replied softly, but the hint of a smile tugged at her lips. Jack nodded and continued his rounds, though he found himself glancing back more than once. He could no longer deny it. He was drawn to her, to the way she carried herself, and to the warmth that seemed to radiate from her even in the early hours of work. By midday the sun climbed high, casting sharp shadows across the ranch. Jack and Emily found themselves at the same spot again, this time repairing a section of fence that had been damaged during the storm. Emily carried the tools with ease, setting them down as she assessed the broken fence posts. Jack watched as she worked, impressed by her strength and efficiency. It wasn't just physical strength. It was the way she planned, thought, and acted with quiet confidence. "You're good at this," Jack said, handing her a post to lift. Emily laughed softly, a sound that was light and full of life. "I've had practice," she replied, adjusting the post carefully. Their hands brushed for a brief moment, sending a small shock through Jack. He felt a warmth spread across his chest that he hadn't expected. He quickly looked away, focusing on the fence, but he couldn't shake the feeling. Emily, meanwhile, continued her work as if nothing had happened, though a faint blush touched her cheeks. After they finished, Jack suggested they take a short break. They walked to a shaded spot near the creek, the sound of flowing water filling the quiet space between them. Jack leaned against a tree, feeling the rough bark against his back, while Emily sat on a nearby rock brushing her hands off. The air was filled with the smell of wet earth and grass, and for a moment neither spoke. They simply enjoyed the peace of the moment. "You seem different from anyone I've met," Jack said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was low, thoughtful. Emily looked at him, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Different how?" she asked. Jack hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "You're calm, strong, and you notice things most people wouldn't. You care without making a show of it. It's impressive." Emily smiled faintly, looking down at her hands. "I just do what needs to be done," she said softly. "It doesn't feel like anything special." Jack shook his head. "It is special. I've never seen someone handle so much with such quiet strength." "You're remarkable." Emily's lips curved into a small, shy smile. She wasn't used to receiving compliments, especially from someone like Jack, who was usually focused on work and action rather than words. For a moment the air between them shifted, charged with an unspoken understanding. Later that afternoon the ranch hands needed help moving hay to the barn. Jack and Emily worked side by side, lifting bales and stacking them neatly. Sweat ran down their faces, mixing with the dust of the hay, but there was a lightness in their actions. They laughed at small mistakes, teased each other gently, and shared stories of their past. Emily spoke of growing up on a small farm, learning early how to care for animals and manage a household. Jack listened intently, surprised by how much he enjoyed her company beyond work. He realized he had never met anyone who balanced kindness, strength, and humility so perfectly. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Jack and Emily found themselves walking toward the barn together. The ranch was quiet, the animals settled for the evening, and the warm glow of sunset cast long shadows across the fields. Jack felt a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. He wanted to say something, but the right words eluded him. Emily, sensing his hesitation, simply walked beside him, her presence comforting and steady. When they reached the barn, a small calf had wandered off again, tangled in a patch of weeds. Emily moved quickly, guiding the animal with gentle words and steady hands. Jack followed, helping to untangle the calf and free it. As they worked together, their hands brushing occasionally, Jack realized he was noticing every detail. The way her hair fell over her face, the careful way she handled the animal, the soft determination in her eyes. He couldn't ignore it any longer. Later that evening, Jack sat by the fire in the kitchen, Emily preparing a simple meal nearby. The room was warm and filled with the comforting aroma of roasted vegetables and fresh bread. Jack watched her quietly, noticing how effortlessly she moved, the calm confidence in her gestures, and the small smile she gave when she saw the fire glowing just right. He felt a deep admiration and something more, a feeling that had been growing steadily over the past days.
"Do you ever take a break?" Jack asked, finally speaking. Emily glanced up, her hands still busy. "I take small ones," she replied. "But there's always work to do."
Someone has to keep things running smoothly.
Jack nodded, understanding the quiet dedication behind her words. He realized that her life was built on care, responsibility, and a commitment to others.
It made him respect her more than he had expected. Over the next few days, Jack found himself seeking small ways to be near Emily. He offered to help with chores, asked questions about her work, and even found excuses to be in the kitchen during meal prep. Emily, in turn, responded with gentle kindness, not forced or flirtatious, but natural and genuine. Jack began to understand her deeply, not just what she did, but who she was. He admired her humility, her courage, and the way she made the ranch feel like home for everyone. One afternoon, a small accident occurred. A young horse had stepped awkwardly, twisting its leg. Emily rushed to the side of the animal, her hand steady as she examined it. Jack moved closer, ready to help, but Emily gestured for him to stay back. She worked with skill, comforting the horse, wrapping its leg, and guiding it back to the barn safely. Jack watched, amazed by her competence and calm under pressure. It was moments like these that made him see her in a new light, not just a cook, but someone extraordinary in every sense. That evening, after the work was done, Jack and Emily sat outside on the porch, the sky painted in deep purples and blues as stars began to appear. The air was cool, filled with the scent of evening grass and the distant sound of cattle settling in the pastures. Jack felt a quiet courage rising within him. He wanted to tell Emily something important, but he wasn't sure how.
"You've changed the way I see this ranch," Jack said finally, breaking the comfortable silence.
Emily looked at him, curious. "How so?" she asked softly. Jack took a deep breath. "I used to think it was all about work, action, and strength. But you make it more than that. You make it feel alive. And I don't know, you've changed how I feel about things." Emily's eyes softened, and she smiled faintly, a warmth in her expression that Jack had grown to cherish. They stayed there for a while, watching the stars emerge in the night sky. Jack realized that he had been drawn to Emily for more than just admiration. He felt a connection forming, something deeper than friendship. Emily, meanwhile, felt a growing sense of trust and comfort around Jack. She had noticed his gentle side beneath the rugged exterior, and she appreciated the respect and care he showed her without expecting anything in return. Over the next few days, their bond continued to deepen. Jack found himself looking for small opportunities to be near Emily, whether helping with chores, carrying water, or simply sitting with her during quiet moments. Emily, in turn, allowed herself to enjoy his company, sharing small stories, smiles, and quiet laughter. Their friendship had grown into something tender and meaningful, though neither of them had spoken the words aloud. One morning, Jack helped Emily carry a basket of freshly picked vegetables from the garden to the kitchen. As they walked side by side, their hands brushed briefly, sending a small jolt through Jack. He looked at her, noticing the calm confidence in her eyes, the gentle smile on her lips. Ghislaine realized that he was beginning to feel something more, something he could no longer ignore. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, Jack knew he had to confront his feelings. He didn't know how Emily would respond, but he could no longer pretend that she was just the cook. She was someone extraordinary, someone who had quietly captured his heart through her strength, kindness, and unwavering care. And so, as night fell and the ranch lay quiet under a blanket of stars, Jack felt a new determination. The connection he had been nurturing over the past weeks had grown into something undeniable. He knew that the days ahead would test their bond, challenge their hearts, and reveal the depth of their feelings. But he also knew one thing with certainty. Emily had become more than a friend, more than a helper. She had become someone he could not imagine living without. The next morning, the ranch was alive with activity. The sun had just begun to rise, casting soft golden light across the fields. Jack was already at work, moving cattle along the fence line, his horse steady beneath him. Emily was nearby, carrying buckets of water and checking on the animals with the same quiet care she always displayed. Jack found himself stealing glances at her, noticing the small details. The way she tilted her head when she listened, the slight curve of her smile when something amused her, the gentle way she touched the animals. It was during the morning chores that Jack first realized how deeply he had come to rely on Emily, not just for the practical things, but for her presence. Her calm energy seemed to steady him, making the work feel lighter and the long days easier to bear. He caught himself thinking about her constantly, wondering what she was doing in every quiet moment between tasks. He didn't even recognize when the admiration he felt had turned into something stronger, something that pulled at his chest every time she laughed or looked at him. By mid-morning, a challenge presented itself. A young calf had become tangled in the fence near the edge of the pasture. Jack and Emily rushed over, working together to free it. Emily knelt beside the struggling animal, speaking softly as she untangled the wires and carefully guided it back to safety. Jack reached for a piece of fence that had caught on the calf, his hands brushing hers in the process. He felt a surge of emotion, a mix of admiration and protectiveness that surprised him. For the first time, he realized he didn't just care about Emily's work or skill, he cared about her. Later, when the work was done, Jack found himself walking with Emily toward the ranch house. The sun had climbed high, turning the fields into a warm, glowing landscape. The air was filled with the scent of freshly cut hay and the distant sound of cattle lowing. Jack tried to speak, to find the right words, but every time he opened his mouth, nothing came out. Emily noticed his hesitation and glanced at him with a soft smile. "You're quiet today," she said. Jack chuckled nervously. "Just thinking," he replied, unsure if he was ready to reveal the depth of his thoughts. That evening, after a long day of chores and tending to the animals, Jack found himself lingering in the kitchen while Emily prepared dinner. The warm aroma of roasted vegetables and fresh bread filled the room, blending with the soft glow of the setting sun through the windows. Jack leaned against the counter, watching her move with calm precision, and felt a pull in his chest he could no longer ignore. "Do you ever stop?" Jack asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Emily looked up, her expression gentle. "Stop what?" she asked softly. "Working, caring for everyone, for everything," he said, struggling to put his thoughts into words. Emily smiled faintly. "I suppose I never really stop," she replied, "but it feels natural. Taking care of things makes me feel grounded." Jack nodded, understanding more than ever why he felt so drawn to her. The days passed quickly, each filled with work, small conversations, and shared moments that grew more meaningful with time. Jack found himself looking for excuses to help Emily, to be near her, and to share the quiet beauty of the ranch. He admired the way she handled every task with care, the way she seemed to notice everything and everyone, and the way her calm presence made even the hardest days feel lighter. One afternoon, the ranch faced a true test. A storm had rolled in unexpectedly, dark clouds covering the sky and lightning striking in the distance. The wind picked up, rattling the windows of the barn and sending loose tools clanging to the ground. Emily immediately took charge, guiding the ranch hands and animals to safety. Jack followed her lead, amazed at how quickly and efficiently she managed the chaos. She spoke softly but firmly, her voice cutting through the storm, calming both people and animals alike. Jack realized in that moment that Emily's strength went beyond physical skill or knowledge. It was her courage, her calm in the face of fear, her ability to care deeply for everyone around her without hesitation. He watched her, awed, and felt a sense of admiration that went beyond anything he had ever experienced. He had known he respected her, but now he realized he was falling in love with her courage, her kindness, and the steady light she brought into his life. When the storm finally passed, Jack and Emily stood outside, watching the clouds drift away and the sun return to the sky. The ranch was damp but safe, the animals unharmed thanks to Emily's quick thinking. Jack turned to her, feeling a mix of relief and admiration. "You were amazing today," he said, his voice full of genuine awe. Emily smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I just did what needed to be done," she replied softly. "But, thank you." That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Emily, about the way she had handled the storm, the way she worked quietly but effectively every day, and the way she had changed his perspective on life at the ranch. He realized that he could no longer keep his feelings hidden. Emily was more than just a companion at the ranch. She had become the center of his thoughts, the reason he looked forward to every day, and the person he admired most. The next morning, Jack rose early and found Emily in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. He watched her for a moment, taking in the familiar scene, the soft sunlight, the aroma of food, the calm and steady way she moved. He realized he could no longer see her as just the cook. She was strong, kind, brave, and gentle all at once. She had become someone essential to his life, someone he couldn't imagine losing. Jack cleared his throat and stepped closer. "Emily," he began, unsure of how to continue. She looked up, meeting his gaze with a soft, curious expression. I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low but earnest. Emily's eyes widened slightly, and she set down the knife she was holding, giving him her full attention. Jack took a deep breath. I've realized that you're more than just the cook to me. You're everything I've been looking for. Someone I care about more than I ever thought possible." Emily blinked, a faint blush spreading across her cheeks. She had sensed Jack's growing admiration, had noticed the small ways he sought her company, but hearing the words aloud made her heart flutter. She swallowed, feeling a mix of surprise, warmth, and something tender stirring inside her. "Jack," she said softly, unsure how to finish. He reached for her hand, gently holding it in his. The touch was electric, sending warmth through both of them. Jack continued, "I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been drawn to you. Not just for what you do, but for who you are." I think I'm falling in love with you." Emily's eyes glistened, and a smile slowly spread across her face. "Jack, I feel the same," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The relief and joy in his chest were overwhelming. He squeezed her hand gently, their eyes locked in a silent understanding. For the rest of the morning they worked side by side, but the air between them was different now. There was a new warmth, a quiet intimacy that hadn't been there before. Every glance, every brush of hands, every shared smile carried a depth of feeling neither could deny. Jack realized that the connection he had been nurturing over the past weeks had grown into something undeniable, something real and powerful. Over the next few days, their bond deepened naturally. They shared quiet moments in the fields, laughter over small mistakes in the barn, and long talks by the creek. Jack found that he couldn't stop thinking about Emily, and Emily discovered that she enjoyed his company in ways she hadn't anticipated. Their feelings, once unspoken, now hung in the air with a quiet, beautiful tension. One evening after a long day of work, Jack and Emily sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the rolling hills. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and gold, reflecting off the cattle and the fields. Jack took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace and contentment. Emily leaned slightly against him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. He realized that he had found something he had never expected at the ranch, a true connection, built on respect, admiration, and love. As night fell and stars began to twinkle overhead, Jack knew that this summer had changed his life forever. He had come expecting long days of hard work, simple living, and solitude, but instead he had found Emily, strong, kind, and extraordinary. She had shown him that love could be quiet, steady, and built on small acts of care and understanding, and he knew, without a doubt, that he would never see her as just the cook again. The next morning the ranch woke to the soft glow of the sun peeking over the hills. Jack rose early, as was his habit. But today he felt a quiet excitement pulsing through him. He knew that the summer was nearing its end, and the thought of leaving the ranch without sharing his heart fully with Emily was unbearable. She had become a part of his every day. Her laughter, her calm presence, the way she cared for everything around her, and he realized he could no longer wait. He found Emily in the kitchen, the warm light of dawn streaming through the windows and highlighting her features. She was humming softly, moving gracefully as she prepared breakfast for the ranch hands. Jack paused at the doorway, watching her for a moment. Every detail, the way her hair caught the sunlight, the gentle way she handled the dishes, the calm determination in her eyes, made his heart beat faster. He had never felt this way before, and the feeling was both thrilling and terrifying. Emily looked up as he entered, giving him a small, welcoming smile. "Good morning," she said softly. Jack nodded, his voice catching slightly as he replied, "Morning." He walked over to the table, clearing his throat. "Emily, I need to tell you something," he began, trying to keep his tone steady, but his heart raced in his chest. She tilted her head, curiosity and warmth in her eyes, sensing the seriousness in his voice. Jack took a deep breath. "I've realized something important over the past weeks. I came here thinking this summer would just be about work, horses, and the land.
I never expected to meet someone like you.
You're strong, kind, brave, and you've changed the way I see everything. I think I'm in love with you." For a moment, Emily didn't speak. She felt her chest tighten, a warmth spreading through her as she processed his words. She had sensed his feelings over the past weeks. The little gestures, the way he sought her company, the way he looked at her. But hearing him say it aloud made her heart swell with joy. Slowly, she walked closer, her hands brushing against his. "Jack, I feel the same," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I felt it for a while, but I wasn't sure if you felt it too." Jack's eyes lit up and a smile broke across his face. He took her hands in his, holding them gently but firmly. "I never want to be without you," he said. Emily's eyes glistened, and she leaned slightly toward him. The kitchen, the smells of breakfast, the morning light, all of it seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a quiet, perfect moment. After a few heartbeats, they laughed softly, the tension and fear dissolving into relief and joy. Jack pulled Emily close, careful and tender, and they shared their first quiet embrace, feeling the comfort and warmth of finally acknowledging their feelings. It was a simple moment, yet it held everything they had both been longing for: trust, admiration, and love. The days that followed were filled with a new energy. Jack and Emily worked side by side with ease, their connection now deeper and more open. They shared small smiles across the barn, laughter during chores and quiet moments by the creek, speaking freely about dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. Jack found himself noticing even the smallest details about Emily, the way she tilted her head when listening, the soft gestures she made for the animals, and the calm authority she carried. Each observation deepened his love for her. One afternoon, Jack and Emily decided to check the far pastures together. The sun was high, casting long shadows, and the fields were alive with the sounds of cattle and birds. Emily carried a basket of feed while Jack led his horse beside her. They talked about their lives, sharing stories from their past and dreams for the future. Jack realized he wanted Emily by his side in everything he did, not just for this summer, but for the years to come. As they approached the barn, a small calf had become stuck between two posts. Without hesitation, Emily stepped forward, speaking gently to calm the animal while Jack helped free it. Their hands met briefly as they worked together, and both felt a spark of warmth. Jack realized that life with Emily wouldn't just be about love. It would be about partnership, shared effort, and mutual care. She wasn't just someone he admired. She was someone he could rely on, trust, and build a future with. That evening, after the work was done and the ranch had settled into quiet, Jack and Emily sat on the porch together. The sky was painted with deep shades of purple and gold as the sun set over the hills. Jack reached for Emily's hand, holding it gently.
I don't want this summer to end without knowing we'll have a future together, he said softly. Emily squeezed his hand, her eyes reflecting the last light of the sun. I want that too, she replied. I can't imagine my life without you. They stayed there for a while, watching the stars appear in the night sky. The gentle sounds of the ranch, distant cattle rustling leaves, the whisper of wind, filled the quiet space around them. Jack felt a deep sense of peace. Emily had brought warmth, care, and love into his life in ways he had never expected. He realized that the simple moments, working together, sharing meals, caring for the animals, had built a bond stronger than anything he had imagined. Over the next week, Jack and Emily began planning for the future. They talked about staying at the ranch together, sharing responsibilities, and building a life filled with love, trust, and mutual respect. Jack admired Emily not just for her strength and kindness, but for her wisdom, humility, and the way she approached life with balance and care. Emily, in turn, appreciated Jack's courage, honesty, and the way he respected and supported her in every task. One morning, while they were feeding the animals, Jack stopped and looked at Emily, a quiet determination in his eyes.
Emily, he said, taking both her hands in his, I want to make this official.
I want us to be together, not just for the summer, but forever. Will you stay with me? Emily felt her heart swell with joy. Tears glistened in her eyes as she nodded, a bright smile spreading across her face. Yes, Jack, I will, she said softly. From that day on, life at the ranch took on a new meaning. Jack and Emily worked side by side, shared quiet meals, and celebrated small victories together. Every day was filled with laughter, care, and the comfort of knowing they had found each other. They continued to face challenges, the animals, the weather, and the demands of the ranch, but now they faced them as a team, united by love and mutual respect. The summer drew to a close, but Jack had no desire to leave. He had come to the ranch expecting long days of work and simple living, but he had found something far more important: love, companionship, and a partner to share his life with. Emily had shown him the beauty and quiet strength, the power of kindness, and the depth of connection that could be built through patience and care. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a long day, Jack reflected on how far their journey had come. He remembered the first moment he had seen Emily in the kitchen, assuming she was just the cook. Now, he couldn't imagine life without her. She had become his anchor, his inspiration, and the love of his life. Emily looked at him, sensing his thoughts, and smiled. Jack returned the smile, feeling a warmth that filled his chest completely. In the weeks that followed, Jack and Emily settled into a comfortable rhythm. They shared early mornings in the fields, quiet afternoons in the barn, and peaceful evenings in the kitchen. Each day brought new moments to admire each other, new reasons to laugh, and new ways to strengthen their bond. The ranch, once just a place of work, had become a home filled with love, laughter, and shared purpose. Jack often caught himself watching Emily as she worked, noticing the small details that made her extraordinary. Her strength, her kindness, her patience, and her quiet confidence were qualities he had come to admire more deeply with every passing day. Emily, in turn, noticed Jack's thoughtfulness, courage, and unwavering support, appreciating the man he was and the partner he had become. As summer gave way to early autumn, the ranch was alive with color, the fields turning golden, and the air crisp with change. Jack and Emily stood together on a hill, looking out over the land they had worked on and cared for. They held hands, feeling the warmth of each other's touch, and smiled. Life had brought them together unexpectedly, and they had found something rare and beautiful. True love born in the simplicity of everyday life, in shared work, and quiet moments of understanding. Jack turned to Emily, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "I never thought I'd find love in the kitchen," he said softly, a smile tugging at his lips. Emily laughed gently, leaning into him. "And I never thought I'd find someone who sees me for who I am, not just what I do," she replied. They shared a quiet embrace, the world around them fading into the background. In that moment, nothing else mattered. They had found each other, and that was enough. The ranch continued to thrive, filled with the energy and love of two people who had discovered something extraordinary in the simplest of places. Jack and Emily faced every challenge together, celebrated every joy, and shared every quiet moment. Their lives were intertwined, built on trust, respect, and the deep connection they had nurtured over the summer. And so life at the ranch moved forward, filled with laughter, hard work, and love. Jack had come thinking the summer would be just another season of labor and solitude. Instead, he had found Emily, the woman who had quietly captured his heart, challenged him, and changed his life forever. They had discovered that love could grow in the most unexpected places, that true connection came from understanding, respect, and shared experiences, and that sometimes the person who seemed ordinary at first glance could turn out to be the most extraordinary of all. Jack and Emily stood together at the edge of the field one last evening, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted with shades of pink, orange, and purple, the air filled with the soft sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Jack held Emily close, feeling her warmth, her heartbeat, and the love that had grown between them. "We'll face everything together," he whispered. Emily smiled, resting her head against his chest. "Always," she replied. And with that they walked back to the ranch house, ready to begin the rest of their lives together, hearts full, and love stronger than ever.